Hi, everyone, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Stacked Mentorship podcast, where we're here to talk all things sales, mentorship, and career development. On today's episode, I'm excited to be speaking with Andrés, who is a senior account exec over at Amplemarket and spent 2 years as an account exec at Apollo. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about his journey into B2B SaaS, hitting quota consistently, building a personal brand, advice he has for young sales reps, and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's jump straight in. Andreas, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Omar. Thank you for inviting me. Happy to be here.
So amazing, Andreas. What I normally do to start this podcast is talk about your first sales role. But I know from your LinkedIn, you were doing a bunch of interesting things beforehand, I think in marketing, as a director, as a CEO. I would love to just hear what it is, you were doing beforehand and what your journey into sales looked like.
Yeah, so before I was in sales, I was doing growth marketing. I had my own business that was servicing startups in Latin America and in the US, offering growth marketing services. And then after that, I also transitioned into an event business with my wife. She had an event going on, so I invested quite a bit in there, and then the pandemic hit and I went bankrupt.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh man. Yeah, no, a lot of people I know had a similar situation. And so, was it just from, okay, bankruptcy happened. Did you realize you needed to kind of figure out an alternative? Did you already know, okay, I want to break into B2B SaaS and be an account exec? Was it just something that happened by chance? What did that look like?
I think it was both. So when I went bankrupt, um, I knew that I had to get a job that allowed me to grow my revenue based on my own efforts. And I knew that was in sales, being in growth marketing, I could see like what sales teams were doing and I could recognize that they were making a lot of money and that their income really depended on how good they were. So that interested me into like an account executive or account manager type of role. Um, and then I started applying and I got hired by Apollo and the rest is history.
Rest is history. Amazing. And so obviously, like you mentioned, you kind of did have some insight, right? Like running the marketing agency, you saw how the sales function and stuff were operating. Did you find it a pretty seamless transition? Was breaking into B2B SaaS suddenly, and especially a pretty hyper growth company like Apollo? I mean, everybody in sales knows Apollo these days.
Yeah.
What was this transition like from entrepreneur, business owner to, account exec?
So the transition was tougher than I thought. When I joined Apollo, we were post Series A. So like Apollo wasn't as known. So it wasn't like the household brand name
Mhm.
that is now.
Yeah.
Um, so that was one thing. But then the other thing was, like breaking through the marketing mindset and jumping more into the sales mindset, which there's some similarities. There's some things that marketing helped me with in sales with copywriting, LinkedIn presence, the importance of like engaging in a very healthy way with prospects, nurturing them. But then taking that mindset shift into the sales role where you want to close business, where you are talking face to face with customers, and it's not only through newsletters and emails and all of that. So it was a harder transition. Like my first 4 to 5 months in sales, like I didn't hit my quota. I
Mm.
I was, like I was struggling. Um, and then I am guessing we'll delve deeper into it, but then I made a series of changes that helped me like ramp up and become a really good, or at least a better seller. Um, but yeah, so the transition wasn't hard. The mindset shift was the hardest part.
Interesting. Interesting. And so interesting as well that you joined Apollo at a point, like you said before, they were a household name to now they're just a huge enterprise product-led growth. Everyone in sales know them. And interestingly, the number of entrepreneurs and people outside of sales who are subscribed to Apollo and stuff is pretty crazy these days. Can you summarize what that's like going from Series A startup to, I think they're over 1,000 employees now. I'm not sure what time you left, but what was that kind of journey like? So you were not only growing as an individual, kind of breaking into sales, but then on the back of a rocket ship as well.
Yeah. So um, it was interesting. I now understand why they call unicorns a rocket ship. because they moved so fast. So changes were happening really quickly. I needed to adapt very quickly. I always say like a month in a rocket ship or high growth startup equals like a year or 2 years in any other company. So that was really interesting. When I joined, they were Series A. Then soon after that, they raised Series B. Then they raised Series C. Then they raised Series D. When I joined, we were like 100 employees, and now they're like, I don't know, reaching 1,000. Um, so yeah, so that was really interesting. I was able to learn quite a bit, but I think the most important aspect was how quickly you're able to adapt and pivot from the changes that you're constantly making to make sure that both the product and your go-to-market strategy is aligned with the objectives that the company has overall.
Interesting. And so you said you started there first 4 or 5 months. I think you didn't hit quota. Can you tell me what that's like? So you've broken into B2B sales, you're working at a cool startup, but maybe it seems it's not working out or you're not hitting your numbers. What was that like? Love to know more.
Yeah, so it was frustrating. It was a little terrifying because I was like, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna fire me." Um, so that was that was hard. Like those first months were hard. I was trying to acquire as much knowledge as possible on the product, the industry, the space, um, also on sales cycles in general, because I hadn't really done that in a marketing role. Um, so that was really tough. I think props to Apollo and to my director of sales at the time was they were really supportive, and they actually gave me money so that I could purchase my own development, so that I could subscribe to courses and get mentors
Mm,
and stuff like that. So props to them for that. And then the other thing that happened was once I was in the sales org, I was seeing what the most effective and the best sellers, the top performers from Apollo were being able to bring in money. And I was like, oh my gosh, they're making a lot of money. So that was one of the like objectives or goals that I had. I said to myself, I'm a very ambitious and goal driven person. So I was like, if they can do it, then why can't I do it? And that completely shifted my approach of I want to be able to be like them and even better. So everything that I was doing on a day to day basis was how can I get the enablement so that I can quickly get to where they are.
interesting. Because then I think, and it's interesting on your LinkedIn, you are someone who has your quota attainments on your LinkedIn profile. It seems like, yeah, from that point onwards, was it a case the switch flipped in your head from that point on? I think it was very consistently hitting your numbers for the next couple of years. I think you were there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it was interesting. It was like there was this one month. It was February, like 2 years ago. And by that time I had already started this mentorship with Maura Celine. And I started taking some courses. I took another course from Kevin Dorsey. I started listening and watching all of the calls from our top performers. I think in our analytics for video recording, you would always see Andres. Like I was watching every call that I could, from the best deals, the worst deals, to see like one kind of the process. And then something happened on that February where I hit quota. I think it was like 100%. And I was over the moon. I was so excited. And then things started clicking. I started recognizing, where do I win? What are my own personal strengths that I can leverage to my advantage? Um, and then from then on, it was just like consistent quota attainment, over hitting quota. I think in my first, after not hitting quota, then on that next fiscal year, on my first 6 months, I had already surpassed my annual quota. Like I was already over
Wow.
my annual quota. So I had like 6 months that I could have taken for vacation if I want.
Interesting. So you mentioned a couple of things there, the kind of the change in your mindset, learning from your peers, and investing in learning solutions. Can I just ask a bit more about the consistency as sales is obviously very up and down. We just had Q1 finish. Everyone's kind of reset now. What do you find is the thing that made you so consistent? Is it something that you have a daily routine? You make sure you're kind of incorporating, I don't know, prospecting or learning on a day-to-day basis. it's this kind of ongoing mindset. So maybe you're looking out to the annual target. Like what makes you so consistent?
So I think this is going to be a little counterintuitive because, of course, you do need to have systems in place to build pipeline. You do have to have systems in place to ensure that you're following up correctly. And all of those things are important. But I think one of the things that I recognized in my own personal strengths was if I look to do good to my prospects, if I am genuinely curious, genuinely well intended to help them, then things start happening as a logical consequence. So I was never trying, and I still don't try to fit my prospects into my own sales cycle. What I consistently started doing was that I was aligning with their buying cycle and their buying process. And I was just there to help them. I consider myself a buyer enabler instead of a sales or a seller.
Yeah.
Um, and then what started happening was that all of the pipeline that I was generating and that was being generated for me started trickling down. So I knew that because I was offering this really good service to my prospects, my win rate went really up. So more than the systems that I had in place and more than the processes was that genuine human factor of I'm here to try to help you. And they could recognize that. And because I was doing that, you know, um, win rates went up. And then if I didn't win a deal, they would like email me, Andreas, we wish we could have worked with you, but for X and YZ reason, we decided to go with the competition or we decided to stay with the same thing. So that was very satisfying. Um, so there's many things that I could attribute my success to, but I think the main thing is the human aspect of sales, building trust, generating trust with my prospects and letting them know that they have in me a partner that's going to help them achieve whatever objectives they're trying to achieve.
Interesting. And did you find it any kind of resistance switching to that mindset? As obviously sales reps listening to this podcast will be like, yeah, that's all well and good, but I've got a quota, I've got deals to close, I've got a deadline. I'd love to be a buyer enabler if I could be, but at the end of the day, I need to make sales. Or how does that sit in your mind?
So actually, like that mindset wasn't hard for me to adopt. And I think one of the reasons why my first few months in sales were not successful was because I discarded that mindset. Um, I used to be a monk, and in the monastery, like empathy, helping, service, that's all very part of what you need to do. And it's very paramount to like your life as a monk. So that's always been ingrained in me. But when I joined sales, I thought that my attitude needed to be more salesy, more pushy,
Hmm.
more manipulative. So like I needed to manipulate my prospects into actually, like signing the contract. And that was so wrong of me. Because what I recognize is that there's resistance to that type of attitude. So, and I think a
Yeah.
lot of sales go south when the prospect recognizes that there's very heavy commission breath and
Yeah.
they recognize the salesiness of the person and people dislike that. So when I shifted again to this mindset of like, I'm here to help instead of I'm here to like close you with before my quota, before I have to achieve quota, then, like that was very important in my sales career. And it wasn't that tough of a mindset shift. It was just recognizing I was like, and that's something that every seller needs to do. What are my personal strengths? And how can I leverage those so that I can be a more efficient seller? And my mistake was that I kind of, like disregarded my personal strengths
Hmm.
and started to become this type of seller that I thought was, like the stereotypical seller. Um, when I erased that and with enablement, with development, and then I applied my own personal strengths into it, it just happened like logically. So it wasn't that tough.
Cool. And could you maybe just highlight some maybe that you see from other account execs that you work with in your team? Maybe some like common pitfalls that account execs fall into that makes them, like you say, have that commission breath versus being that buyer enabler, and kind of things that people could fix to, like you say, come across as less salesy to their prospects?
Yeah, I think one of the main things, and I think it happens a lot with newer reps, is not being genuine, you know, kind of utilizing these phrases that everyone utilizes and that every seller or every prospect recognizes that that's a seller. So when they disregard their own genuine self and start trying to fake this seller attitude or seller mentality, I think people can spot that. If you're not genuine,
Mm.
I mean, just in day to day relationships, like normal people can recognize when someone's not being genuine or when they're trying to fake it or when they're trying to fake it till they make it. And so what happens is like a very common example is a stereotypical seller has an answer for every question and has a solution for every problem.
Yeah.
And that's impossible. We're imperfect. We don't know everything. Our product doesn't solve everything. Whatever you're selling is not the perfect solution for everyone. So I think sellers, they try to frame the sales cycle in a way where we are your perfect solution. We are the exact thing that you need to achieve these objectives. And that's not genuine. So I think it's important for sellers to take a step back. Oh, I don't know that answer. Hey, I don't know. Let me check. Or, hey, you have this objection. Instead of saying, oh, yeah, actually, we can solve that. Like someone says, hey, actually, your competitor does this better. Oh, no, let me show you how we do it better. Take a step back. Hey, what do you mean they do it better? How do they do it better? What kind of results are you seeing that you're not seeing with us? So, kind of stepping back. So, instead of listening to answer, is listening to understand. And I think that's something that's very common that sellers fall into. Um, and it should be fixed because it's going to increase your win rates if you do.
Yeah. Yeah, and you made a good point on messaging as well. Because I only made this. I was the junior sales rep. I used the templates, the standard messaging, and it was only actually when I added that I was a founder on LinkedIn that I started getting all of these inbound things. And then you're like, oh, you think you've thought out the sales messaging, but you can smell it a mile away when you're being sold to. And like you say, it just changes the whole dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, Interesting. So you mentioned a couple of things that going back to your points on what kind of turned you around, what went from missing quota to hitting quota, investing in solutions is one. Getting a mentor was part of that. Could you tell me about the benefits you received getting a mentor, the value they added to you, all these kind of things?
I think it was one of the most important decisions in my sales career. And even now that I've been able to find some success in sales, I still have mentors. And why is it important? There's always a learning curve when you join a new company, especially if you're a new seller. You got to learn how to sell. You got to learn the processes. You got to learn, the value that you offer. You got to learn the industry. You got to do all of these things. Um, but there's people that have gone through that already. So, first and foremost, you need a mentor within your same company. Because, if you get an outside mentor, they're going to be able to teach you about sales. They're going to be able to teach you about mindset. They're going to be able to teach you about all of these things, but they haven't sold your product. So the way in which you can utilize that information and craft it so that it works within your product is much more different than if you get a mentor from within the company. So what I did is I picked two top performers within my company and I was, sending them my emails. Hey, what do you think about this email? I was reviewing their calls. I was asking them to join some of my calls. I was asking them to review my calls if they could. Of course, they're very busy. Top performers are very busy. So it wasn't like I was abusing their time. But that was one thing, getting mentorship from within the company so that I could know exactly how to sell this. And then when you get outside mentorship, then you're able to understand better the type of resources and the type of also mindset. And I'm talking a lot about mindset because I think sellers need to have the proper mindset um, that then you can apply into your own process. So to me, that was very, very important. Also, another mistake that I think new sellers do, especially, is they'll try to consume all of the content out there. And oh, I'm going to start my new sales role. I'm going to listen to every podcast. I'm going to read
Yeah.
every ebook. I'm going to subscribe to every course. And then they have
Yeah.
all of this noise, and they try to apply it all. And it's not genuine. It's impossible to apply it all. And it may not even apply to your industry, to your product, to your service, whatever the case may be. Um, so what I like to say is when you want to look for a mentor, you got to find the areas where you think you need help and then try to find a mentor that's actually been there and can actually help with that. Because if not, you're just going to be wasting time, wasting money. Um, and that's not the way it works. I always tell new sellers, hey, pick an area, focus on that one, get proper mentorship, get proper enablement in that area. Once you think you've like crushed it on that area, move on to the next and then keep on going.
No, that's a great answer. And so you said obviously there are benefits to, and you'd recommend people have both internal and external. Just starting with the internal, in terms of how someone should go about finding one. Is it just a case of like you did? Okay, I want to reach out to the top performers in the team, see how they're doing it. Is there certain, I don't know, characteristics, qualities, things that you should also be considering at this
Yeah.
point?
Yeah. So top performers, they come in every shape and size, but they have very common traits. They have different styles, but there's common traits to them. They're very efficient. They're very hungry. They're very highly motivated and they're always learning. They never stop learning. So when you pick a mentor internally in your company, you got to see, obviously look at the reports. Who's selling the
Yeah.
most? Who are the top ones? Um, and then, also split it up. Who's the best one at generating pipeline? Who's the best one at closing? And review their calls without reaching out to them. Like, hey, if you have, like a Gong or an Avoma or whatever tool it is that you're using to record calls, watch them before you even reach out. And then look at their style because top performers have different styles. And you got to see something as like, hey, if I get to be successful, I would like to emulate or I would like to reflect some of those characteristics of that style. There's people that are much more analytical. There's people that are much more people oriented. There's top performers or mentors that are much more focused on like really good discovery in the sales side or really good at negotiation. So you got to pick the style that aligns better to who you are and who you want to be. And that's who you should go with.
Interesting. And then I think for external mentors, it becomes a little bit more complicated, right? Because internal, you can just be like, okay, top performers, there's only going to be a certain number of them. Review the call scripts, like you said, it'll be easy enough to set up. When kind of thinking about somebody external that you want to bring on board, are there any extra considerations you think of? Like, okay, I want them to have specifically sold to my type of industry, or I don't know, they're VP of sales. I want to be VP of sales. Like, what are the other considerations that kind of go into finding an external mentor?
Yeah. So I think one of those is find a mentor um, that 10 years down the line, if you were like that person, you would be satisfied with yourself. So, hey, like this mentor, like he's had success and where he's at right now, like if I was there, I would be very happy. I would be very, very satisfied with myself. So that's one characteristic. The second characteristic I think is there's got to be alignment within like the industry, the space that you're in. So like software sales, if you're going to find a mentor for sales in particular, go with someone that has sold software sales, you know, and then think about the type of product and service in which you are right now. Maybe there are some software sellers that are like enterprise software sellers that sell $1 million deals, but right now you're an SMB rep, like you're selling $10,000 deals, $5,000
Mm.
deals, like that's not going to be as helpful, even though you want to get there because it doesn't align with who you are right now. So you want to have a mentor that has the experience and has walked through your shoes of selling products or systems or softwares that are similar enough with regards to the price range and the persona for you to like actually go there. And then the third one, which I think is the most important, is why do you need a mentor? What is it that you want to
Mhm.
get out of mentorship? Like, do you want to get tactical advice so that you can improve in a specific area? Do you just need a coach to help you with like the right attitude? So you need to do an analysis of like, where am I failing? And and in those areas that I'm failing, which is top priority for me to solve, for me to get from point A to point B. And that's why, for example, to me, it was more because he had a course that's called From Demo to Close. And in my
Mm,
sales cycle, like I was doing demos and I was closing sales. And those sales cycles, at first, when I was in Apollo and I was an SMB rep, and then I moved on to mid market and senior account executive and all of that. But at first, my sales cycles were very short. So I wanted to make sure that I got that process of like demoing and closing deals like as streamlined as possible. And I knew that's where I was failing. So that's why I went to more. So I think those areas are important to consider.
interesting. So kind of like a lot of self-reflection of where you're at, areas that you need to prove so that you're kind of going into the mentorship, not kind of like blindly, loosely, but with a clear kind of agenda, goal, outcome, these kind of things.
Yep.
Interesting. And so for a bit more tactical advice, maybe on the internal mentor. So say someone's listening to this, they are, I don't know, SDR or something, they know who the top performers in the company are. What should their approach be? How often should they ask for time? Is it just like you did, maybe like reviewing some of your calls, inviting them to scripts? Should it be like they try and set up like a weekly, bi-weekly, one-to-one? What does this look like?
So you got to be careful because everyone's busy, and it's not like a top performer is going to make money because a new SDR or a new AE is going to learn from them. So it's not
Mhm.
like they're getting compensated for it. So you want to be mindful of their time. Um, so I think first, like, do all of the homework yourself. Ask your manager, "Hey, who do you think I should learn from?" And then do as much reviewing as you can. Like most teams, they'll have sequence platforms. So you can actually look at the sequences that they're running to build pipeline. You can actually see the templates that they have for emails. Like if they're doing calls, you could actually review the call recording to
Yeah.
see what they do. Same thing with, like video recording of a virtual cell or something like that. So do all of the homework yourself and then, like reach out to them. Hey, Omar, I actually saw how you closed this deal. I thought it was really interesting how you did X, Y, and Z. I am struggling with this. How would you approach it? Leave it open at that. Maybe they'll respond via Slack and then after they respond like, "Hey, this is spot on. This is exactly what I need," whatever the case may be. "Do you mind if we connect for like 15 minutes? I just want to run some questions by you. Like, I definitely admire what you're doing, and that's where I want to get to." Leave it open. You know, they could say no. They could say no. Fortunately for me, they said yes. Um, then after that, like you want to build a relationship to the point where you could, like be comfortable enough to be like, "Hey, this is my recap email that I'm sending. Could you provide quick feedback?" There has to be that comfort and that trust for you to get there. But for them to actually see that you're hungry, and I think most top performers, they're willing to help if they see that the person is genuinely curious and is hungry. If not, they're not going to waste your time. So come prepared, have like the right questions, do your homework, don't just like, it's not a one-on-one to chat. It's not. You got to have some objectives for each call. This is what I want help with. How would you do it? This is what I've seen you do. How would you recommend I do it? Um, so I think that that's important and be mindful of their time.
Yeah. Same as you reach out to a prospect, show them that you've done the research, it's personalized, book the meeting.
Correct. Correct.
Amazing. So yeah, transitioning back to a bit about yourself. So you obviously in marketing before, you said you kind of brought some of these skill sets into sales that help you be a better seller. One of those that I think you're particularly strong with is building a personal brand on LinkedIn, these kind of things. Can you tell me the influence you feel like that's had on your sales career, your prospecting, all of those kind of things? And yeah, recommendations for people thinking about being a bit more active on LinkedIn.
Yeah. So I think the marketing background helped, um, especially with copywriting. Um, but my LinkedIn activity, it started with gratitude. Like I was starting to get a sense of like how to become a better seller. I was starting to find some early success, and I was very grateful for my company to allow me to work remote. And I just posted like, "Hey, super happy that I get to work remote. Thank you." And I just posted a picture of my remote setting, and it actually got some good traction. And I was like, "Oh wow, interesting." Um, so then I just started, like the way I view LinkedIn on my end is I view it as a journal. I view it as my personal and professional journal. So if something comes up that I learned, if I had an experience where like I completely failed, if I had great success, I'll post about it because chances are that someone can relate, someone has been through it, someone is maybe experiencing it right there and then. Um, and then there's several things like you got to have some consistency because of the way the algorithm works. Like, you got to get momentum. So it's
Mm.
not like, oh, I posted, I got 3 likes and I'm not going to continue posting. That's where everyone starts. Once you start getting momentum and you start seeing what's working, then it's going to be highly beneficial. Um, why? Because there's going to be more inbound leads that come to you. People that, hey, I saw your post. I'm actually looking at X and Y software. Can we set up a call? So in the revenue side, that's going to be efficient. Two, you're going to get much more, like many more job offers. People know who you
Yeah.
are, what you want. So like your career growth is going to be really important. Um, and then third, you're going to make some really good connections. Like we're here, like we're connecting. Now we know each other and it was because of LinkedIn. And I can
Yeah.
say the same thing, like I've gone advisorship roles because of LinkedIn presence. I've met some amazing friends because of LinkedIn presence. I found my mentors because of LinkedIn presence. So is it a must to be a top performer? No. Is it a very nice to have? Yes.
Yeah. No, I'm completely the same. I thought a lot of it was when I heard people talking about posting on LinkedIn, they were very much talking about inbound leads. And it was like, that is part of it. But like you said, like we are sat here now, advisors we have for Stacked, mentors that we have for Stacked, bunch of people that I met in Lisbon and stuff, all coming through LinkedIn is pretty amazing. Um, cool, Andres. Really appreciate your time today. Final question before I let you go. What advice would you give if you were sitting down to maybe a younger Andreas, someone who's thinking of breaking into B2B SaaS? Maybe they're in their first account exec role. How do they consistently hit quota? How do they build a career that they can be proud of?
Yeah. I think it really depends on the context, but I think an overall advice that I would give my younger self or someone in that type of role, be patient with yourself. Don't try to skip phases. You're not going to get to from A to C by skipping the whole B, C, D, E, F. Like you need to you know, career growth is like building blocks. Like if you don't have foundations, the whole tower is going to crumble. So get your foundations, be patient with yourself, recognize exactly where do you need to improve, and be very conscious of the steps you're going to take to get there. Um, and then be yourself. I think that's the most important aspect. Like everyone has beautiful characteristics and traits, and they have unique things that are unique to themselves. One of my biggest mistakes was trying to not be myself and try to emulate the perfect seller. And I was doing myself a disservice. I was doing my prospects a disservice. I was doing my company a disservice. Um, and when you are yourself and you can take advantage of the traits and talents that you were given and you just enhance those with the right systems, then you're going to see magic happen. But don't skip steps, like take it easy. Don't be hard on yourself either. You know, a lot of selling is mindset. So if you are too hard on yourself because you lost a deal, you're too hard on yourself because you didn't book a meeting, you're too hard on yourself because you haven't had success building pipeline, that's going to affect your mindset and that's going to affect your continuous growth. So laugh about it. Oh shit, like that cold call went horribly wrong. On to the next. Oh, silly me. On to the next. Um, I think those are some things that I would tell myself.
Amazing advice, Andreas. Thank you again for sharing your time with me today. If anyone listens to this has any follow-up questions, obviously they should make sure they prove that they've done the work first before contacting you. But is LinkedIn the best way to reach you?
Yeah, definitely. LinkedIn.
Amazing. Appreciate your time, Andreas. I'm sure we'll speak again soon.
All right.